They fired me in front of everyone to look strong. What they didn't realize? I had records of every deal, every strategy, every success they claimed as their own. Sometimes karma needs a little help. I'm Rowan, and 5 years ago, I walked into TechFlow Industries with nothing but a worn laptop and dreams bigger than my bank account. Trust me when I say those 60-hour weeks weren't some badge of honor I wore proudly. They were survival. While others went home to their families, I lived in that office, surviving on vending machine coffee and the belief that hard work actually meant something. Sarah and Marcus weren't just colleagues back then. They were lost causes. I remember the first time I met Sarah. She couldn't even explain what a conversion funnel was without stuttering. Marcus? He once asked me if ROI stood for return on investment with complete sincerity. But I believed in people, maybe too much. I spent countless nights training them, sharing my strategies, teaching them everything I knew. I watched Sarah transform from a nervous intern who spilled coffee on every important document into someone who could command a room. I helped Marcus find his voice, taught him how to sell not just products, but dreams. The breakthrough came during my 3rd year. I was drowning in spreadsheets at 2 a.m. when it hit me. A revenue model that combined predictive analytics with behavioral psychology. For 6 months, I refined it, tested it, lived and breathed it. When I finally presented it to the board, the room went silent. Then the numbers started flowing in. Profits tripled within 8 months. The company went from struggling startup to industry leader. I didn't just save their jobs, I built their future. But here's the thing about success. It has a funny way of revealing people's true nature. Suddenly, Sarah was the marketing genius behind our revolutionary customer engagement strategy. Marcus became the visionary sales director who transformed our revenue approach. My name? Conveniently forgotten in every presentation, every board meeting, every success story. I watched them climb the ladder I'd built, step by step, using my own ideas as their stepping stones. The board started talking about decisive leadership and strong vision. They wanted executives who looked the part, who fit their image of what success should look like. At 35, I'd created the strategies that made millions, but I was still just Rowan from data analysis, still working late nights while they took credit during morning meetings. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. These people I'd mentored, helped, believed in, were systematically erasing me from the story of my own success. What hurt most wasn't the lack of recognition or promotions. It was watching Sarah and Marcus sit in those glass offices, knowing they couldn't have gotten there without me, and seeing them look right through me like I was just another piece of furniture. The company culture shifted too. Suddenly, everything was about appearances, about showing strength, about making tough calls. And I had this sinking feeling that I was about to become the toughest call of all. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday. By Tuesday, I knew something was wrong. Sarah and Marcus kept having hushed conversations that stopped whenever I walked by. The office felt different, like the calm before a storm that everyone could sense, but nobody talked about. I'd seen this before in other companies, the subtle shift in energy when management was planning something big. I was working late Wednesday when I overheard them through the conference room wall. "The board wants to see decisive action," Sarah was saying, her voice carrying that new authoritative tone she'd developed since her promotion. "We need to show them we're not afraid to make tough calls." "Rowan's been here longer than both of us combined," Marcus replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "He basically built the foundation for everything we're—" "Exactly," Sarah interrupted, and the finality in her tone made my blood run cold. "He's old regime. The board wants fresh thinking, dynamic leadership. They want to see that we're not held back by sentiment." I pressed myself against the wall, hardly breathing. These people I'd trained, mentored, believed in, were planning to throw me under the bus. And not just fire me quietly. They wanted to make a statement. Thursday morning came like a death sentence. The all-hands meeting was called for 10 a.m. I sat in the back, watching familiar faces file in, and felt this strange detachment, like I was watching my own execution from outside my body. The board members sat at the front, stone-faced and serious. Sarah stood up first, then Marcus joined her. As we move into our next growth phase, Sarah began, her voice carrying across the silent room, we need to ensure our team reflects the dynamic, forward-thinking culture that will drive our success. My heart pounded as I realized what was happening. They weren't just firing me, they were making it a public spectacle. Effective immediately, Marcus continued, and I swear he looked directly at me. We're releasing several team members whose vision no longer aligns with our strategic direction. When they called my name, the room erupted in whispers. I felt every eye on me as I stood up, my legs somehow carrying me forward. The humiliation burned in my chest as Sarah handed me a folder, my termination papers, with a practiced, sympathetic expression that made me want to scream. Rowan has been with us for 5 years, Marcus announced, as if reading my eulogy. We thank him for his contributions during our early growth phase. Early growth phase. They were summarizing the best years of my life, the strategies that made them millionaires, as if I was just some intern who helped with filing. I wanted to stand up, to scream the truth, to tell everyone that the revolutionary revenue model they kept bragging about was mine. But I just stood there, frozen, as they continued. His replacement will help us implement the innovative strategies our leadership team has developed, Sarah added, and I caught her glance at the board. Several members nodded approvingly. As security escorted me out, security! Like I was some kind of threat, I passed my old desk where my 5 years of late nights and breakthrough moments were being boxed up by some kid from HR. I looked back one last time and saw Sarah presenting a slide deck to the board. My slide deck, my strategies, my work. Walking out those doors felt like dying. But as I sat in my car in the parking garage, something shifted inside me. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath the pain, something else was growing. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They forgot that I wasn't just some employee. I was the architect of their success. And architects always keep the blueprints. The first 3 days after my firing were the darkest of my life. I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall, replaying every moment of humiliation. But on that 4th morning, as I was going through my personal files to update my resume, I found something that made my blood run cold. A USB drive labeled TF Projects 2019 to 2024. Everything, every strategy document, every email thread, every piece of evidence that showed the revenue model was mine. I'd been backing up my work religiously, and they'd never asked for my personal backups when they escorted me out. My hands shook as I opened file after file. Email conversations where I explained the analytics framework to Sarah. Meeting notes where I walked Marcus through the customer psychology theories. Draft presentations with my name all over them, time-stamped months before their breakthrough presentations to the board. They hadn't just stolen my work, they'd erased my fingerprints from it completely. The anger was white-hot at first. I wanted to march back there and expose them publicly, create a scene, make them pay. But as I sat there, laptop open, evidence scattered around me, something shifted. I remembered a quote from one of my business school professors. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but justice is a feast that requires perfect timing. I started making calls, not to lawyers or reporters, but to the board members themselves. It wasn't hard to find their personal numbers. I'd helped arrange dinner parties for half of them over the years. I positioned myself as a strategic consultant, offering insights about the company's future. I've noticed some concerning trends in the leadership structure, I'd say casually. Perhaps we could discuss this over coffee. Mrs. Patterson, the lead board member, was the first to bite. We met at her favorite restaurant, where I played the role of the humble former employee perfectly. I just want the company to succeed, I told her earnestly. There are some inefficiencies I noticed, patterns that concern me. Slowly, carefully, I began planting seeds. Not accusations, just observations. Questions about the sustainability of current strategies. Concerns about whether the leadership team truly understood the systems they were implementing. I shared anonymized examples of similar companies that had failed when leadership claimed credit for innovations they didn't create. Each conversation was strategic. Each board member I met with got a slightly different piece of the puzzle. I was building a case, but making them think they were connecting the dots themselves. It was exhausting work, constant networking, lunches, coffee meetings, all while pretending I harbored no ill will toward the company. Meanwhile, I was building my own future. The forced unemployment gave me time to create something bigger than TechFlow had ever been. I started reaching out to former colleagues who had left the company, building a network of talent that had been undervalued or pushed out. We were all hungry. We all had scores to settle. The breakthrough came when Harrison Mills, the CEO of one of TechFlow's biggest clients, reached out to me directly. Someone had told him I was available for consulting, and he wanted my opinion on TechFlow's recent strategic decisions. I spent hours with him, carefully explaining the flaws in the current approach, showing him how the strategies being implemented were misunderstanding fundamental market dynamics. "Interesting," he said, as I finished my presentation. "These all seem like solvable problems. The kind of problems someone with deep understanding of the systems could fix." "Absolutely," I agreed, "but it would require leadership that truly understands the technology and strategy involved, not just people who can present it." That night, I lay awake knowing the pieces were falling into place. Sarah and Marcus had wanted to show the board they were decisive leaders. They'd fired me to prove they weren't held back by sentiment. But they'd forgotten the most important lesson I'd tried to teach them years ago. In business, like in chess, you need to think 5 moves ahead. They'd barely planned one. The final phase of my plan was about to begin, and they had no idea what was coming. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after my firing. Harrison Mills was on the other end, his voice urgent. "Rowan, I need you at the TechFlow presentation today. Bring those system diagnostics we discussed." "Today?" I checked my calendar, pretending I didn't already know exactly what was happening. "I wouldn't want to intrude—" "You won't be intruding," he interrupted. "Mrs. Patterson specifically requested your presence, as our consulting expert." The drive to TechFlow felt surreal. I parked in the visitors section, watching employees I knew walk past my car. A few recognized me, their expressions ranging from confusion to sympathy. None of them knew I'd been having regular coffee meetings with their board of directors for months. Walking into that building was like entering a gladiator arena. Sarah and Marcus were in the lobby, frantically reviewing their presentation tablets. Sarah saw me first, and the color drained from her face. "What the hell is he doing here?" Marcus hissed, loud enough for me to hear. "I was invited," I said calmly, flashing my visitor's badge. "Board consultation." The conference room was exactly as I remembered it. Same long table, same uncomfortable chairs, same wall-mounted screen where Sarah was already setting up their presentation. The board members filed in one by one, each giving me a knowing nod. Mrs. Patterson sat directly across from me, her expression unreadable. "Before we begin," she announced, "we have a strategic consultant with us today." Rowan has been providing valuable insights about industry trends and will be observing. I watched Sarah's hand shake as she began the presentation. Today, we're excited to share our revolutionary new client retention strategy, she said, her voice overly bright. This innovative approach combines behavioral analytics with predictive modeling to create unprecedented customer lifetime value. My own words, my own strategy. But as she continued, I noticed something beautiful happening. She was stumbling. The confident presentation style she'd developed was cracking under pressure. She kept glancing at me, and each time she did, she lost her place. Marcus took over the technical section, pulling up charts and graphs I'd created 2 years ago. Our proprietary algorithm predicts customer behavior with 94% accuracy, he declared. Mrs. Patterson raised her hand. Mr. Hendricks, could you explain how you developed this algorithm? The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Well, it's based on machine learning principles that we... Specifically, which principles? Board member Harrison Mills pressed. What was your methodology? I watched the sweat form on Marcus's forehead as he fumbled for an answer he didn't have. These weren't just presentation slides to him. They were foreign concepts he'd never truly understood. Perhaps, I interjected softly, the question is about the underlying structure. The way the algorithm weights recency, frequency, and monetary value against behavioral trigger points. Marcus looked at me with something between gratitude and terror. Yes, exactly what Rowan said. The room fell silent. Mrs. Patterson leaned back in her chair, and I could see the realization dawning on several board members' faces. They weren't just witnessing poor presentation skills, they were watching leaders unable to explain their own supposed innovations. Mr. Davies, another board member, Margaret Chen, spoke up. You seem quite familiar with these systems. Have you worked with similar algorithms before? I've developed a few, I replied modestly. In fact, the framework they're presenting follows a very specific pattern. I'd be curious to see the original development documentation. Sarah's tablet slipped from her hands, clattering onto the table. The room watched as she scrambled to pick it up, her composed mask finally falling away. I think, Mrs. Patterson said quietly, we need to address some concerns that have been raised about the authenticity of our innovations. The board has conducted its own investigation over the past few months, and we've discovered some discrepancies. The reveal was like watching a dam burst. Document after document appeared on screen. My original files, complete with timestamps, edit histories, and email chains proving authorship. The board had everything. Marcus stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous, he shouted, but his voice cracked. We've worked hard for everything we've... Sit down, Mr. Hendricks. Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through his protests like ice. You've worked hard to appropriate someone else's work. Sarah tried a different approach, tears forming in her eyes. We never meant to. Rowan was a mentor to us. We learned from him, and... Learning from someone and stealing their work are two different things, Harrison Mills interrupted. Firing them publicly while claiming their innovations as your own? That's not mentorship. That's betrayal. The confrontation I'd dreamed of for months was finally happening, but it felt different than I'd imagined. Watching them crumble brought less satisfaction than I'd expected. What mattered more was what came next. The board has made its decision, Mrs. Patterson announced. Effective immediately, Ms. Chen and Mr. Hendricks are terminated for misconduct and intellectual property theft. Mr. Davies, would you be interested in discussing your return to the company in a senior leadership position? The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah looked at me with pleading eyes. Marcus's face had gone from red to ashen. The entire room waited for my response. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Patterson, but I'm afraid I have to decline. The shocked silence that followed was perfect. You see, I continued, 3 months ago, I started my own company, and Harrison Mills here has agreed to become our first major client. I smiled at the board. Sometimes the best revenge isn't taking back what was stolen, it's building something so much better that the theft becomes irrelevant. Harrison stood up and shook my hand. Rowan's new venture will be handling all our tech strategy moving forward. We're excited about the partnership. I gathered my things and headed for the door, but stopped to look back at Sarah and Marcus one last time. You taught me something important today, I said. Loyalty isn't about staying where you're not valued. It's about building something with people who understand your worth. As I walked out of TechFlow for the second time, I heard Mrs. Patterson addressing the remaining staff. This is what happens when you try to build success on other people's foundations. The truth always comes out. 3 months ago, they'd fired me to impress the board. Today, the same board had fired them for stealing from me. But the real victory wasn't their downfall. It was the company I'd built, the team I'd assembled, and the future I'd created entirely on my own terms. They'd forgotten that I wasn't just the analyst they could discard. I was the strategist who always thought 5 moves ahead. And this game? This game was always mine to win.